different platforms and those who are watching live as well as the recordings. Today we have with us Brandon Handley. He's going to talk about cultivating your awakening. And he's a podcaster of the Spiritual Dope. And he was one of the beautiful souls who was kind enough to interview me on his podcast. He is not your typical life transformation coach, that's for sure. And without further ado, you take it on, Brandon.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I know that we connected not too long ago. You were on the podcast, interviewed you. Loved your background and what you're doing. I love your neuroscience background, right? That I think one of the conversations pieces that we ended with on that conversation is where are science and spirituality merging, right? And so I think that you bring that kind of authority, as it will, by not being, but by being in this, by being a scientist, right?
Right.
You bring an authority to it that not everybody can, and I think that that's really cool. And then you offered me the opportunity to participate in this consciousness, this bit of a summit that we're doing, and so got pretty excited about it. And you're like, hey, what do you want to talk about? And there's so many different areas that you can take this, right? We can talk about angels, we can talk about spirits, we can talk about all these other things that are out there. But I think one of the things that is kind of near and dear to my heart, and I found out after my awakening, was that um, kind of timing your awakening, like saying, hey, I'm gonna go. It's like going to school, right? In 4 years
Right.
I should have my awakening degree. Right.
Right. Right.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You don't go for 4 years, study spirituality or study awakening, and all of a sudden you have like this awakening event. And I learned about that while listening to I think Rick Hansen, I want to say, his book. He's a neuroscientist. No, he's I think a psychologist, and his book is called Neurodharma, right? Is Neurodharma. And he talks about that idea. The very idea is that you create and cultivate a space for an awakening, right? So
Right.
you don't necessarily, and I don't even know if you have to do that, but it's kind of nice if you do it, because if you have an awakening and you haven't cultivated the space and you're not aware of that space, then you might think you're losing your mind, right?
Right.
A
Yeah.
lot of people like to call it like your midlife crisis as well. I was listening to a guy in Self-Realization Foundation, right? He's passed away since now. I forget his name, but he talks about the midlife crisis as like that opportunity to reconnect with God, be like, hey, I'm back. Right.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
this is, we lost touch for a little bit, and I can certainly talk about that a little bit. So the idea is, if I look, and I was able to look back at my awakening though, and see that I had cultivated a space, I had a knowledge of it. So going into it, there was a little bit of, oh my goodness, what's happening?
Right.
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 I was a little scared. Right. At the same time, I grew up with a mother who had exposed me to the concepts of awareness, the concepts of spiritual teachings versus uh, religion being specific law, in the way that, hey, here's the Bible. There's lots of good information in here. As a matter of fact, I was just I was just on a conversation this past week where with one of my mentors, Sri Kumar Rao, who said, who called, instead of calling it religion, he called it wisdom practices, right? And I
Right.
think that if you change that, if you just that dial, right, if you just change that dial just a little bit, you really open up a vista for a lot of people just by changing that terminology. Be like, well, I'm not into the Bible, I'm not into the Quran, I'm not into that. I'm not into religion. But if you flip that over and you say, well, how about their wisdom teachings? Like, well, yeah, wisdom teaching. I might consider some
Yeah.
wisdom teaching.
That's true. Yeah.
So it's there's a filter. We all create these kind of filters. Like I think you had Catholicism in your life, right?
Yes,
Was
I
there?
did.
You had
Yes.
some Catholicism in your life, and you've got this perception that you create of Catholicism while you're growing up. And so you may not be as open to that as like this other religion that pops up or this other one, because you don't have preconceived notions and filters of your past experiences. They're saying all the same stuff over here that they're
Yeah.
saying in Catholicism, but you're like, Catholicism. I've, been there, done that. And I'm going to go over here and have this now. And they're saying the same thing. So the filter's already been established for Catholicism, but it hasn't been established for this other wisdom teaching, this other religion. So, yeah. Yeah. Where do you want to go? How do you want to do this?
Well, what do you want to talk about? So
Yeah.
maybe you can talk about how your journey was like a bit
Mhm.
and what opened you up exactly to it. Yes, all of us go through that phase where it maybe we experience a lot of fear because we don't know what's happening when it initially hits us. It's like, oh my God, am I schizophrenic or something? Yeah,
For
and you
sure.
start asking people who are close to you, is something wrong with me?
For
And you
sure.
hope for reassurance. So maybe,
Absolutely. Yes. Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
maybe
Yeah.
you can go on to say how you overcame that and understood what it was.
Sure, sure. Let me in the space of cultivating awakening as well, right? I'll do it. I'll lead up to that spot.
Right.
So, prior to the awakening experience, I was pretty much a daily drinker, right? Drinking beer, booze, whatever, fairly often. And you know, I had that habit of just kind of sitting. I wasn't doing no self-improvement, right? Like I was just going to
Right.
job, doing my job, parenting, doing my best in that. But at the same time, look, it's socially acceptable. End of the day, go sit down, have some dinner, drink some beers, watch some TV, right?
Right. Right.
So at some point, we start to feel like, is this all that, again, is this all that there is? Right? Is
Yeah.
this? And I started looking around. I'm like, I have a pretty good life. I really did. And I do. I do now. I had a good life then, making good money, working with good people, had a good company, wife that loves me. I love her, happy family, all the things. But something was missing, right? I was like, you can't put a finger on it. And so I started really putting effort. And I said, well, for lack of a better term, I hadn't tried too hard to get to where I was, right? Like, I mean, I tried
Right.
hard enough, but I wasn't like putting in serious effort. I wasn't being
Right.
like, this is what I want to do. This is who I want to be, and be an active participant in my life. I was like, well, I'll take that. Sounds great. We'll do it. We'll go do that. We'll go do this. This is good. And ended up in a good position, right? So I was like, well, what happens if I actually try? Right. And
Right.
because again, I'm feeling this thing that there's more to life. And so my first step in this was I've heard a lot of good news about Adderall, right? I was like, well, I just don't feel like I
Mm.
focus and I'm not putting enough attention and doing these things. I was like, I know what I need. I need some Adderall. I'll just go find a doctor that'll prescribe it for me, and that'll be it. And there's my silver bullet, and life will be great. Well, I did find a doctor after I called like many wellness centers. I called wellness centers. They're like, well, have you tried exercise? Have you tried this, that, the other? Have you tried to quit drinking? I was like, yeah, none of that's going to work for me. I know me. I'm just gonna, I just need some Adderall. Can you help me out? Right. I mean, that was my, I didn't want to do the work. Right.
Right.
I didn't think I needed to do the work. So I got the doctor. He got me hooked up on Adderall, did the Adderall for a little bit, and that was just terrible. It was it was no good for me. I had plenty of focus, but I was focusing on stuff that didn't matter. Totally inconsequential. Was no good for the family, no good for me. And so ended up quitting cold turkey, went through a mild depression. I was like, okay, fine. And I started like listening to like podcasts, and I started I got in a sales coach for my role that I didn't have yet because I wanted to prepare myself for a role. So that was my first step into getting a coach, had a coach, started listening to podcasts, got hooked on the podcast, was listening to this guy who was just like, he was so normal, but he was doing his podcasting. I was like, you know what? was like, I want to do that. Right. And the other thing that
Right.
he was doing too at this time in the story was he was learning how to swim. The guy was like in his 50s, right? And he was learning how
Right.
to become a better swimmer. So he could do he wanted to work himself up to 100 laps. And I was like, you know what? I could swim. I hate, I'm not a big fan of jogging. I'm not a big fan of, sitting on a bicycle, but I would really love to swim. Low impact, good for the body, all these other things. So I was like, and if he can do it, and he was always telling these funny stories, like how he was like, looked like he'd been shot in the water because of how much splashing he would cause. And so I kind of did it along with him in his story. I was like, well, if he can do it, then I can do it. And what he worked himself up to 100 laps, and I'd worked myself into doing a sprint triathlon by the time I think I was 41. And I
Right.
was like, okay. And that was like,
That's great.
I think I had 3 or 4 months to do it, to pull it off. And I ended up pulling it off. But throughout that time, I started listening to all these podcasts. I started my own podcast, sharing my story, and I could feel things changing, right? I was doing things in alignment with kind of who I wanted to become. I was deep into Carol Dweck's the growth mindset, all these other things. I picked up again Sri Kumar Rao. He has a TED talk that was called Hardwired for Happiness, really spoke to me, and just really started to do the work, right?
Right.
Started to do the work. I did my first triathlon, I think real shortly after 41. And so that was awesome. And just like a few months later, I quit drinking entirely. Haven't had a drink. It's been almost 5 years now,
That's
right?
right.
Since I haven't had a drink, but I didn't quit. So this is one of the things that as
Yeah.
you process, as you're going through the awakening, right? So here I am.
Yeah.
So what I'm talking about right now is cultivating the space, right? So we're talking
Right.
about cultivating the space for the awakening. Now, keep in mind, I'm not actively seeking anything. Like I'm not like, hey, again, I got to study for my awakening test. It's coming on Saturday.
Right.
If I don't study for it, like, or if I don't do these things, then it's not going to happen. I'm cultivating this space without the awareness that I'm cultivating the space. And I think that that's tricky, because now if you're seeking this awakening, if you're in the process of, again, you haven't had the experience and you want the experience and you're studying hard and you're really trying to get it. I don't know if you ever seen any of the movies where there's two people and they're both looking for each other, and they pair them up in the movies and they're both like looking around the corner, like, oh, do you see him? I'm
Yeah.
looking for this person. I'm looking for that
Yeah.
person. And it turns out that they're looking for each other, but they
Each
spend the
other. Yeah.
entire time looking for it. It's really similar to awakening, right? You're looking for the thing that's already there,
Yeah.
right?
That's totally true.
And it almost ends up taking more time, right? I feel, because again, I got lucky because I cultivated this space. I began meditating. Oh my, don't even get me started on that. I started meditating, and I never wanted to meditate before, right? I was trying to do better at work. I wanted to have the life that I actually wanted. Again, going back to the beginning of the conversation, I had never tried super hard to do something on purpose, in alignment with who I was, all these other things we, with meaning, part of the community. So I started meditating with Headspace, and I did it for a couple weeks. Then I was like, no, I don't know. I don't think I need it. That's not necessary. And a couple weeks go by and I'm irritable. I'm angry. I don't know what's going on. I'm like, why am I so irritable, angry, frustrated, and annoyed? And I was able to look back at like 2 weeks prior where I wasn't, and what had changed in that 2 weeks. It was the meditation. And I was like,
Right.
you got to be kidding me, man. Cause like, you know how it is. Like, you get told your entire life, you should meditate. You need to get quiet, sit with yourself, reflect. You're like, I got things to do. I have
Right.
all these other things. I don't have 5 to 10 minutes a day to sit around looking at my thoughts and chasing them around. I don't know who,
Right.
but turns out there are crazy benefits to it. So again, cultivating this space. I quit drinking. I do a couple more triathlons. I'm doing my podcast, and my podcast at that point in time was focused on fatherhood, and
Right.
the changes that I was implementing in my own life were the things that I was studying on fatherhood and applying it and becoming aligned and focusing on, focus on family first,
Right.
and really making that a priority, so much to the degree that I still vividly recall where my oldest son, Finn, had walked into my office. I forget exactly what I was doing. And he goes, "Oh, you're busy." And it was like 5 or 6 in the evening. I was like, and I could have, there was a split second there where I saw, kind of two of him in my mind's trajectory, where I said, "Yeah, can it wait?" And it just like doesn't go well, right, for
Right.
him and us. And then there's the other split second. I was like, no, I drop everything now and give him the attention that he needs. He's still a young child. These are formative years, and I want to make sure that he knows that I'm there for him. And
Right.
it was a there was that was a moment, a pivotal moment, I think, in my understanding of um becoming aligned with my purpose, becoming aligned with we talked a lot on that podcast about the idea of the audio matching the video, right? The things that you're saying
Right.
to yourself in your head, the things that you're saying out loud. And does he walk the walk, or does he talk the, all that stuff, right? You got to
Right.
walk the walk. And so that, again, cultivating the space, cultivating the space for the awakening. And couple more triathlons, and then all of a sudden, like out of the blue, this is about, so I actually could probably actually find a little real time, but so I quit drinking in May, doing all the stuff through the summer, and it was right around September, October. It might have been October, because I think we had a chili fest, and I remember like this is just all
Mm.
part of the stuff happening, because there was
Right.
a conversation I was having with my group of guys, talking about the space and getting into this space. I began listening to Alan Watts quite a bit, right? I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but like he's a guy
Yeah.
that, talks quite a bit about it. I mean, he's a really good listen. And one of the things that I did, and I really recall this too, I'm listening to him a lot, and I'm understanding the other idea of sending your questions, writing your questions down and sending them into the universe, right, for an answer. I kid you not. I wrote down, I was like, all right, universe, show yourself, or like, oh, okay, universe, let's connect, or what, show me.
Right.
And like 2 weeks later, like this awakening experience begins. And I'm like, come on now. Right. I mean, and it's so hard to really put that experience itself into words. Like there's a connection to the universe, your body's buzzing, you feel radiant, there's some type of energy that's just, you're super hypercharged, and there's no logical reason for it. Things are in different colors, foods taste different. You're like, I think and as Alan Watts always talked about, Suzuki talking about awakening or enlightenment, and I definitely would call this the awakening phase. It's kind of like almost walking, kind of two inches above ground, right? So for like
Right.
a week
Yeah.
or two, I'm in this space, and it's, to your point earlier, we talked about it. I'm in this space of, oh man, what's happening, right?
Right.
What is
Yeah.
going on? And I reached out to three people who I had already been having these conversations with to a degree. And one of them was a Buddhist reverend.
Yeah.
Another one was just a near and dear friend who was in the coaching space, but he was also 20 years sober. And another one was just another guy, a good friend of mine, who we had these conversations. We had these open dialogues of kind of what it was like to be a man, a modern man, without, having to be this alpha guy, right? And so we
Mm-hmm.
had some of these, and being a father, and all. So I call these guys up. I was like, Dave, Phil, Sam, I don't know what's going on. Help, right? I was like,
Right.
right? I was like, and so the Buddhist reverend was great, because he's able to kind of, talk me through the space. He
Mm-hmm.
knows this space. I'm like, oh, I don't remember exactly. I wish these are the things that, like, I can tell you right now, if you ever find yourself going through this, write everything down, because you will forget. You'll forget,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of how it all went down. So I didn't, he talked me into a great space, right, and comforted me, right. So kind of the level of am I crazy dropped by like, 10%. So I'm at a 90 instead of 100. And so the next, talking to Dave, he's talking me through it. He's like, all right, what do you want to do? And, here you are in the space, what are you trying to become in your life? And I was like, yeah, man, I want to help people navigate this space, right? Because
Right.
it's a little terrifying and awesome at the same time, because
Yeah.
there's going to be a large amount of people that when they have this experience, they're going to go to a psychiatrist who may not be familiar, and they're going to try to suppress it. Right.
Yes.
And to me, they're going to miss a huge opportunity
Exactly.
in becoming. Right. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. So, and then my other friend, Phil, he's like, yeah, let's talk about it. We talk about it a little bit, and we talked about it in a group. But and this is an interesting part. It's like, I was talking about it just like you and I are kind of talking about the experience, about what I'm going through, about all the connection and all this. I'm talking to a group of fathers as I'm cooking some chili in my kitchen and talking to my wife. She's in
Right.
there and she's participating as well. And my friend Phil, he sends me a message and he goes, Brandon, I think that it's really cool that you're able to have a conversation like that with your wife. And I said, Phil, I don't think she knows what I'm talking about. Right. I don't
Right.
think she
Yeah.
like, because
It's
again, we have these conversations and there are different levels to these conversations, right?
yeah.
There's different perceptions. And if you haven't been through, or you're not going through, or you're not in that space, you're not going to hear the signal words, right? You're not going to hear
Yeah.
like there's definitely signal words. I mean, it's tons of signal words. So I, I talked to her a little bit. I said, hey, I'm feeling this way. I'm going through this thing. I don't know exactly what it is. And, talking to her about the body buzzing, talking to her about this connectedness, talking to her, about all this. She's like, are you on drugs? And I said, no, that would be great if I was, because then that, because then I would have, and that was the thing too. I mean, my podcast is called Spiritual Dope, and it's a little tongue in cheek in the sense that I've experienced plenty of drugs growing up, and whatever. And the thing is like when you get to the spiritual space, it's like that, except for better, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Right.
you're
Right.
it's like you're in this space. It's like it's a spiritual high, right? It's a life high. You're like, and again, these are all things I would have made fun of like maybe 5 days before it. And now I'm
Right.
going through it and experiencing it, but I'm sharing it with her. And it was a very vulnerable moment because you don't know how somebody's going to react to that,
Yeah.
especially, even, your significant other, your wife, your spouse. You've got a family, do I need to pack these kids up? Are you going to go crazy, red rum? What's going to happen next? Right. We don't know. So, I think one of the most pivotal pieces was her acceptance of me in that space and time. She goes, I don't understand. I don't know what you're going through. I don't necessarily understand it, but I'm here for you. And I accept that that's, you feel like that's what you're going through. Right. And, that, while it's not imperative to get the permission from somebody else to have the experience that you're already having,
Yeah.
it gives you the experience to have that in a safe space. Right. But again, it was very scary because I had no idea how she would react to it. Could have gone anyway. So her acceptance of that allowed me to continue really to create a space for me to continue to pursue it and explore it. And really, that's what I've been doing for the past 4 or 5-ish years. I think we're coming up on 5 years now. It's really just been
Right.
exploring what has happened. And that's where we kind of get to this whole idea of cultivating that space. There's a line, there's a kind of a series and a story that's in Sri Kumar's Rao's book, Are You Ready to Succeed? And the story's about a young monk going to a monastery, and he wants to study, and he wants to become enlightened, right? And there's the master of the place, and he comes up there and he goes, "Hey, all right, I'm here. I'm ready. I want to do this. Let's go. I'm ready. I'm ready for my enlightenment." Uh, the spiritual master is like, "All right, well, it's going to take a long time. There's going to be a lot of studies. There's going to be a lot of work. If you do all the things that I tell you to do, it's take about 10 years." Right. The guy goes, all right, well, what if, I work twice as hard, read twice as much, and put twice as much effort into it? How long will it take me then? He goes, 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. And this goes back to that space. And Rumi's line, right? What you seek is seeking you, right? There's this, and it is quite paradoxical. It's the idea that it's already there with you right now.
Yeah.
It becomes like your awareness of that, and saying what that is where language really just kind of falls apart, right? However, that being said, once you experience it, you're like, that's it. That's the thing,
Yeah.
right? Because I think there was even as I was going through it, as you're going through it, you want this validation. And then there was one more guy that was outside of the three guys. This is my buddy Rudy, who was just super devout Christian, Baptist, super Christian. I reached out to him. I was like, Rudy, we got to talk, man. We got to get together. I don't know what's going on. Right. Because
Yeah.
I'm still just reeling from it. I don't know which way is up. And, I could quite literally float away at any moment now.
Yeah.
I need to be grounded. So I reach out to Rudy. Rudy and I, we go and we have some dinner. We have some lunch at a buffet. We're talking. I'm sharing my story. And without hesitation, he's just like, oh yeah, testimony, testify. I guess I don't know how it really works, but that's when you say, you testify to like Jesus is in you, or God's in you, or whatever. I was like, not even a blink, nothing. Like, I mean, zero on the register of you're crazy, Brandon. I was like, I guess I'm all right.
Yeah.
So that experience, that was the awakening experience. And as I was saying, as kind of talking through it, cultivating that space without without an expectation of what's around the corner. Right. And I think that's quintessential as well. Rick Hansen talks about it in Neurodharma. This other book that I just finished reading, it's called The Tools by Phil Stutz and Barry Mickles.
Okay.
It talks about, let me see if I can hold it up here. It's called The Tools,
Ah.
right?
Okay.
They give you 5 tools. I think that they're pretty good. 4 of them are real tools. The 5th one is like the actual effort and willpower to sustain and continue to use the tools. And so I'll give you a couple of examples of the tools in there, and there's multiple other tools to use. But one is mindfulness, right? That's just the meditation. I think
Yeah.
that's everyone's like number one, right? Everyone's number
Yeah.
one is
Yeah.
meditation,
It's always.
mindfulness. And coupled with that is the idea to pay attention to your emotions, right? And I think that Western society, especially men, we don't even know what our emotions are, right? Let alone pay attention to them. So there's like this discovery work of like, all right, being mindful, and being mindful means like not being mindful of like, what are you experiencing? What are you feeling? What are you going through? Right.
Right.
Not being mindful in the sense of, did I remember the butter? Right.
Yeah.
It's being mindful in regards to, what are my thoughts? What am I feeling? Like right now, where I'm at in this present moment in time, what am I experiencing? Right. And connecting with that and being okay with it, and without judgment,
Right.
no judgment, right? It's just, that's a thought. Boom, done. That's an emotion. Boom, done. So mindfulness and working your way through that, and like sneaking emotions, right? Like paying attention, categorizing your emotions, and trying to figure out, exactly what it is you're feeling. Because I think one of the challenges is, if you don't know what your emotions are, how can you address them?
Yeah.
I had to go through this. I had to do this for myself. One of the things I had to do it for myself, because I was having a conversation with the guy, and he goes, Brandon, I'm not hearing anything like your emotions, or you're addressing your emotions in any of what you're doing. I was like, he's right. I don't even know what my emotions are. So I had to go seek out some tools. And I leveraged, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Pluchik wheel, right? It's just like wheel of emotions, and you can kind of go through there and be like, oh, I'm not mad. I'm like this different shade of it. I'm not angry. I'm something else, and developing an understanding of what you're feeling, because if you don't know what you're feeling, that'll make you mad too, right? You're like, I don't know
Yeah.
what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And it just goes straight to anger and frustration. So, that's one of the tools, and that's constant, right? That's just like you check in once or twice a day. You're just being present with yourself and kind of going through there. One of the other tools is like loving sending out love, right? Sending out compassion to everyone
Yeah.
without I actually just heard this line in a song the other day, and it was with I don't want anything from anybody, right? Like no expectations from anybody
Right.
else,
Right.
because I'm loving them, and I don't like I don't want anything, right? I just want to love,
Yeah.
I just want to send it out, I just want to be love. And if you think about there's a Buddha story talks about that too, and a woman that says I want to be happy or something like that. He's like, drop the I and drop the want to be and just be happy, right? Like, so
Yeah.
just be love, right? And radiate that and connect with it at all times. And part of the tool in this book, the tools, they talk about really like seeing like a visual of connecting to somebody, right? Like in that point in time, and feeling it, being love without an expectation. It's unconditional. I don't want anything from you, for loving you, right? It's unconditional.
Right.
I don't care if you're acting like a maniac today. I love you. You're going through something that's making that happen to you today. I love that, like, for you. That's
Mm.
so that's one of the tools. Some of the other tools are give, again, similar to the love, give without an expectation of a return, right? Give without an expectation. I don't know how many times, and I've certainly given gifts before in the past. I'm like, why aren't they using that? What? Why did they give that away? Right? They're using it wrong. What are they doing? Right? So you being able to give freely doesn't mean that you give it and there's no attachment to the giving of that thing. So tools like that. I'm trying to figure out some of the other tools. Um for me right now, one of the biggest things is breath work, right? Which
Right.
is kind of like it's like a meditation on steroids, right? And this goes back again. Rick Hansen talks about it in Neurodharma, and how I think a lot of people think that meditation is going in and trying to make their minds still, whereas meditation, in the way that he had shared it, was to learn how to focus, like pick something to focus on and meditate on that thing, and focus on that, and let go of everything else. And the mindfulness aspect in that meditation is not to stay so focused on it so that it's sustained, like you're trying to use a magnifying glass to use the sun to write your name somewhere,
Right.
but like,
Yeah.
because that's you can't sustain that. The mindfulness in this study is like, your mind is left and you stop focusing on that thing. Okay, come back, right?
Yeah.
No judging that you weren't there. Oh my God, I lost focus. Meditation isn't working, and all this other stuff. But even in what he's talking about is a very good thing to do, is to focus on your breathing, right? Is to
Right.
just in even that. And so that was very helpful to learn that. However, the breath work that I've been doing now, and the breath work that I'm seeing in many different places, there's so many different, I mean, there's so many different ways. Uh, but it gets you to focus on your breath and do it in a repeated pattern to a rhythm, so much so that you lose like your executive function, right? Because you got too many things going on. You lose the executive, you lose the gatekeeper
Yeah.
up here, right? Because you're counting your breaths, you're doing the body movements. It's got to be like this, you got all these things going on,
Yeah.
and you're also breathing properly, right? So you're adjusting your body chemistry to just simply be different. And you have, this is like, you have that meditation experience you've been looking for, right? There's like, the work that I've been is real similar to Wim Hof, where you do a breath hold or a breath retention, and in that moment everything's just perfect. You're like, wow, wow, man, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
everything that you thought meditation was gonna be. um and primarily because people probably don't have the time to develop their meditation skill to that level, right? So I think it's definitely a meditation hack if there is such
Yeah.
a thing. Um, so that one's been a really big one for me, and to make sure that I implement a practice of that every day. So using tools like these, right?
Mhm.
Find the tools that work for you. There's a million of them, right? Exercise, all these things, keeping your word, the 4 agreements, whatever. Find the thing that works for you, that you need in your life, that you haven't implemented, to be in alignment with your purpose. Find your purpose, create a purpose, meaning,
Right.
whatever. Do all the things that get you into alignment with that, and keep doing them, right?
Yeah.
Because you'll find, like I
Yeah.
talked about the meditation earlier, where I stopped for a while, I lost all the benefits. I mean, the benefits
Yeah.
lasted a little while, even in breath work. I have clients that will come in, they'll do the breath work on Sunday, right?
Mm.
We'll do breath work on Sunday. They won't do breath work for the rest of the week,
Right.
which is okay. But they notice the effects of the breath work last until like Wednesday, right? If there's something, to me, that's powerful enough. If there's something you can do for 20 minutes without any extra outside influence, like a literal drug, with just air in your body for 20 minutes, that's going to have a 48 to 72-hour effect on you.
Yeah.
Wow. Right. I mean, so even that. So the thing is, though, to keep doing it on a daily, and it's very similar to these tools. Keep doing them on the daily. Do it without an expectation, as you're cultivating this space for the awakening. And I air quote awakening, because the awakening, it's great and it's awesome and it's wow, but that's just the start. That's just where your work
Yeah.
starts, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's you talk about people. I know the vernacular now is like talking woke, and they're talking about something else. But just because you've awoken to yourself, now it really is a rebirth, right? It really is. You've been reborn, you've been reconnected, you've been reunited, you've been, hey, you those two people that were looking is you, right? Those two people
Yeah.
that were looking is you. And all of the things that you hear, all of the cliches that you hear, like when the student is ready, the master will appear. Right? True,
Yeah. Yeah.
true,
That's
true.
true.
Oh God, how terrible is it? Right? So all these cliches what you seek is seeking you. True,
Yeah.
true, true. So your work is just starting, but the idea is to cultivate that space, recognize it, be ready for it, and just I know people hate the trust in the process line, but trust in the process. Who would you like to become? Set that intent. If you can do that with alignment to some higher, greater purpose, if you can do that in alignment with like who you would actually like to be in the world, if
Yeah.
you can do that in alignment with like your family and everything in community, you can somehow just put that all together. You've got something so powerful, right?
Right.
At your disposal, that there's like there's almost no way the experience won't happen if it hasn't happened already. And then when the experience does happen, it's kind of like that secondary rocket booster, right? You've already
Right.
shot up into space. Now that first one's gonna drop in line. So I
Yeah.
talk about it like the ionic thrusters, right? In space. So which is it's really just a small pulse. But since there's no friction in space, each small pulse adds to the speed that's already happening. So over the long period of time, each bump is going to turn into light speed,
Right.
right? And the amount of effort that it takes to get the light speed is one bump, like one day at a time, one small nudge. And next thing you know, you're hosting a spiritual podcast and talking about spiritual awakening
Yeah.
and
That's
kind of going
true.
through it, right? So I mean, I think that really touches on it. And the other piece I'll touch on too is I've seen this question the other day, and I've definitely contemplated it a lot. And I'm sure one of the things we hear about is, you know, living in a privileged society, right? And being privileged or something like that. So there's a small yes to that, right? And that's not the small yes to that relates to you know, if we look at general Western thought and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Mm,
If we look at that and we use that as kind of like our gauge,
right.
yeah, sure. Because the people that I'm pulling up like a hierarchy of needs thing right over here. I've got a pop-up window. Let me get rid of it. So I mean, you've got your, you know, physiological, your safety, your love and belonging, and your esteem, right? These are deficiency needs in the
Yeah.
hierarchy of needs. If you don't have these, there's some kind of panic, right?
Mm.
If you're like in high school and you're like, why doesn't anybody love me? Right? Like there's like this urge to have somebody loving you, right? Or belong. I don't belong in any of these groups. There's an urge like, why don't the cool kids like me, right? Like, why aren't I popular like Billy? Billy's a jerk and everybody likes him, right? So
Right.
there's this need for belonging. These are deficiency needs. There's this need for safety. Do I have enough money? Do I have a
Yeah.
roof over my head? Or all these things. And if you don't have these, there's like that becomes your primary thing. Like if you don't eat and you start getting hangry, you're like, I need food now or somebody's going to die, right?
Yeah.
Deficiency needs. So once all of these are met, you're like, oh, cool, everything's cool. Then like, you know, then on the hierarchy of needs, it's labeled growth needs. You've got this self-actualization.
Yeah.
And until you have that self-actualization, until you have this awakening moment, which is exactly what self-actualization is. That's the awakening, right? The awakening peak experiences. Peak experience means, oh, everything I've been doing is like really small compared to what I'm capable
Yeah.
of. Right? Like
Yeah.
what I thought was huge is like nothing. So you get into the self-actualization space only, and it only becomes like a peak experience because of the way that we've got our society configured, right? Because we have the opportunity to work on self-actualization and you know, all these other things without having to focus on, I think, the deficiency needs, right? We only think they're deficient because we've been marketed to that they're
Right.
deficiencies. We've
Right.
been marketed to that if we don't have this, uh, everything's going to fall apart. My life, you're not worth life isn't worth living until, like, you know, you've got these certain achievements. This has happened. That's happened. All these boxes are checked. We have the opportunity to say, all right, well, I'm going to bypass all these things. There are certainly there's like some needs, but what happens if you like let go and let God, right?
Yeah.
Like what happens if you, which I did really, if I look back at it for 40 years, I just kind of let go. Excuse me. Again, I did some things, I played some effort, but like, there's no way I would have told you at age 20 that at age 40, I landed like in a decent spot on purpose, right? I would have been able to say, well, that was all on purpose. I did on, you know, whatever. A little bit of let go and let God without knowing that that's what I was doing.
Right.
Right. So if we can start to do that and flip the deficiency needs into something less than necessary and do the what's the other, not self realization,
Mm.
which will flip itself into a self actualization, right? So if we do the inner work, if we do the meditation, if we focus on the compassion, if we're kind to others, if, you know, what we send out, right, that kindness, that loving of others, the giving, the um being fine with where we are, doing my best in this time and space with what I have, and realizing that, you know, we've got infinite access to all the things. And I don't care, anybody will tell you there's still stuff falling, there's dust gathering on the planet now that's turning
Yeah.
into other things. Our planet, you know, whatever we need, we'll always have enough of,
Yeah.
right? That'll always exist. So if we can release some of these deficiency needs to a certain degree, we don't have to have like we privilege isn't a requirement, right?
Yeah.
It does seem to, it happens somewhat by a byproduct of privilege because you stop worrying about all these things, right? And then
Right.
you're like, oh well, I guess since life is good, I'll check out spirituality. And again, in the awakening experience, you don't really have a choice, right? In the awakening
Yeah.
experience, you don't
Yeah.
really have a choice. It shows up at the door with all of its bags and it's like, I
Yeah.
can't go anywhere else. I'm here,
Yeah.
right? It's like, I'm here to stay. And you're like, I don't know about that. Here's another thing I'll throw in there too, right? In the cultivating the awareness space and getting into that space, I also believe that, you know, in regards to Joseph Campbell's the story of the hero, right? The hero arc. Uh, the call of the hero is really, you know, your inner self trying to like break out, right? Your inner self, your, you know, again, self-actualization, connection to source, whatever, your peak experience, say, hey, I'm here, right? I experienced it myself in my, you know, before I turned 20, but I shoved it away. I was like, ah, you know what? Because I thought about like, you know, chasing down you know, religion and spirituality then and interest. But you know, again, you have all these thoughts like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to make money doing that. And, you know, how's that going to pay and all these other things. So you go and you do all the things that are, you know, not even just socially acceptable, but like, what are your friends going to think if you're like, yeah, I was thinking about going becoming a Quaker,
Yeah.
right? They're like, what, man? Don't do that. Come with us and party this weekend. You're like, all right, fine, I'll go party this weekend. And you party for 20 years. And then you're like, oh, it shows up again, right? That
Yeah.
the call of the hero comes again. And again, that's your spirituality is like, I will not be ignored any longer. Right.
Yeah.
I'm here. And so think about it as that the call of the hero and it's literally, it's always knocking, right? There's always an opportunity to kind of just give it space and allow for it. So that's I think what I got for you today in the cultivating the spirituality and the awakening space, right? And being
Right.
ready for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was actually very true, much of what you said. I guess if you speak to anyone who is coming from a place where they are awakened and they went through this, they actually tell you the same thing, but everyone has a different version of it. But the experience is always the same. It's nothing you have ever experienced, nothing you will ever experience is going to be greater than this. It costs nothing. And it actually, like you said, just requires us to do that work and, find out why. But I always say, like what you said, it always starts with this question where you're sitting down one day and you're like, what have I been doing this for?
Right. Yeah.
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 And
Yeah.
that triggers a series of events that is just mind blowing. And yeah, of course, there are moments where we tend to go really high and we're like, oh no, I got to come back down again. So I
Mm,
guess the one of the main things most people actually always ask is, when you reach that elevated state, you
mhm.
got to bring yourself back down to this earth and realize, because once you're there, there are many times you feel like, oh my God, I don't think anyone's going to connect with me. I don't think I connect with
Oh yeah.
anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
all application back into your real life and how
Mm,
you view things. So
yeah.
maybe something on that you would like to say?
Well, yeah, look, I mean, that again, that's the whole gist of the spiritual dope podcast is like, how do we integrate, you know,
Yeah.
what we've just figured out? And when Alan Watts talks about Buddhism, he talks about the Sangha, right? There's a space and a
Yeah.
place. There are rules, right? You go
Yeah.
in there
Yeah.
because first, it's really, it's a challenge if you go through this alone and you don't have a religious space already, if you don't have an existing spiritual practice, if you don't have something like that, then yeah, you're on your own and
Yeah.
it needs to come out. It's got to, you're blossoming. You're blossoming. You have no choice. It's like, you're like full on blossom. You can't stop it. You're like, "Ah, it's
Yeah.
coming."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
you've got to have these conversations and it's hard. It's really hard. Um, it, but as you move forward, you try to have some conversations with some people, anybody really,
Mm.
right? Try to have any of the conversation. I picked up the phone. I called all kinds of people. Geez, what did I do? I Googled like yoga studios. I Googled people that handled spiritual awakenings, and I reached out and interviewed people. I mean, it's the internet, right? We have
Yeah.
access
Yeah.
to any and everybody. Um, so that's what I did. I talked to some close people. I talked to some friends, and they were kind of like, "What are you talking about?" But that's also part of the awakening process too. Some of what has always been will not always be, right? Like,
Right.
so, again, the drinking really fell away. Like, I mean, do I want to drink every once in a while? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Right. Would it be easier sometimes if I could just go get blasted and like hit the reset button on like today? Sometimes, yeah. I'm not going to deny that. But at the same time, I could also just go do breath work and
Yeah.
reset my physiology. I could go do a number of other things. And when tomorrow comes, I'm going to feel better that I did the thing and didn't drink. And you know what? There's no harm. And I want to predicate it too. Really good documentary on Priyananda. Is it Priyananda? No, I'm thinking Sarva Priyananda. Autobiography of a yogi, right?
Okay.
Real good documentary on him, on a guy, and when he was opening his place in Hollywood, who would come up, and the guy was like an alcoholic, a drug addict. He would sleep around and all these other things. And he goes, he smoked cigarettes, and he's like, "Do I need to quit drinking?" He's like, "No." Because do I need to quit sleeping around? No. Do I, we still love God? And the guy's like, "Yeah, I'll still love God." So I mean, the gist of it is like, you do whatever you want, just as long as you still like, find time to connect and love God, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, in the end, and you got to call it whatever you want, like, because we
Yeah.
talked in the beginning, there's these preconceived filters, like, he said God, I'm out, right?
Yeah.
So there's this connection, that just connect with yourself, do the self-reflection, do all the other stuff as long as you need to. And at a certain point, as you're doing this work, as you're cultivating this space for yourself, it's going to happen on its own,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, I was thinking about this earlier today. Is like the awakening is, that's you blossoming. When a blossom blossoms, the next like piece is ours. Like, you turn into you fruit, right? You fruit
Yeah.
and then you
Yeah.
seed. So I mean, there's still a lot going on. There's still a lot
Yeah.
of work happening. I interviewed a guy a couple weeks back who I would say is either enlightened or really freaking close, right?
Yeah.
And high up there. And we talked about it. Awakening is not being enlightened. Awakening is, again, you're like, I just got here.
Right.
Right? We just showed up. There's a now the work actually starts.
Sharks. Yeah.
Work actually starts now. So listen, if you're just entering into this space, right, reach out to people who you think will accept it, or don't like, or if you don't feel like anybody close to, so many resources online, like Google, like spiritual awakening. What are the signs of
Yeah.
a spiritual awakening? Is there like an awakening center near me? What are the signals? um Wayne Dyer has a movie called The Shift, which I would recommend anybody
Yeah.
watches. Right. There's a book that goes with that. And then like you can keep reading all the books that, because after that, you're just going to keep, there's this insatiable hunger to know more
Yeah. Yeah.
after this happens for you. Right.
Yeah.
Um, so lean into it. Don't be afraid. That is the call of the hero. That is the Joseph Campbell's. That is to follow your bliss. That is to connect with your heart. It's what we're here for. Right.
Yeah. I
I think
do.
that's what we're here for. And I'll toss spiritual dope. One more like line is that what I've created in spiritual dope is really similar to what Franciscan monks created. Right? It's spirituality for the streets. It's spirituality
Yeah.
that's approachable. It's
Yeah.
like, look, I'm over here wearing a sweatshirt. I have
Yeah.
a 9 to 5. I've got my
Absolutely.
kids.
Yeah.
I pay rent. I'm not levitating. I'm no different than you, other than I had this experience. Yes. There's a box outside. Awesome. He said Fox, not box. Oh, that's what the dog called me.
Right.
Infinitely cooler. I did see a fox earlier today too. Anyway, so
uh,
it's I think one of the challenges in the spirituality space is like there's some people that put themselves at an elevated level. I'm not elevated.
right.
I'm not elevated at all. Like, I mean, I promise you, my wife and I argue. I promise you that
Hmm.
I did dishes earlier today. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the
I'm
stand
still like
stuff happens.
nothing's happening. Like where
Yeah.
I dream a genie and do this and like something it
Yeah.
all like magically happens. What I will say though, too, is that there is anybody who's like into law of attraction, like once you start like leaning into this and start speaking like who you want to become and living with this purpose and intent, some things will open up that are going to blow your
Yeah.
mind. I mean, don't get me, there are some things that are going to happen like, what? Like, how did that wasn't even possible, right? Like, I mean, I'm talking about like I random checks like money. I was doing another podcast called The Prosperity Practice, where like, talking about getting a certain amount of money like every day and making a dialogue. I got like 2 or 3 checks like I wasn't looking for them, sent to my
Right.
house, like almost that exact same amount. I'm like, is anybody paying attention to this? Because this is crazy. Like,
Right.
these are the synchronicities, but like there's so much use the tools, have no expectations, relax and hold on to the handles.
Right.
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 Right. Keep the safety belt on and everything will be all right.
Yeah. Okay. So if you have nothing else to say, Brandon, we're probably going to end it. And we'd like to thank you so much for doing this for us and reaching out to everybody. I'm sure a lot of people have all these questions and they have always seeked answers. And, the best thing that they always hear is from someone who has a similar experience, or someone who's like, wearing, you don't look like a monk walking on the street, anything
Right.
like that. You're
Right.
just a normal human being. And hey,
Yeah.
look, that's a person I know. And
Right.
they have something I can talk to. So I guess that's what a lot of people are seeking for. And we'd like to thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah.
And yeah, so if anyone has any questions and they would like to ask Brandon, they probably can send him an email. So Brandon, if you could probably give your email out, like say it out, I'll put it in the chat box. And
Mhm.
then yeah.
Sure. Brandon at spiritualdope.co.
All right, that's great. It's always simple is the best. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
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 And if you guys have any further questions and you didn't get that, you can send it to fmna1808@gmail.com and we will send it out to Brandon. Right.
Yeah. And I'll throw out
Yeah.
there, like, if anybody's interested in grabbing a breath work session,
Yeah. You
and
should.
the sessions are kind of fun, right? Like it's with modern music, to the beats, and just kind of like, it's nothing, again, it's a totally approachable experience, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to have you hyperventilate. I'm not going to try and rebirth
Mm,
you. This isn't psychotropic. This is just a connection to yourself, having this experience like we talked about. If you've been trying to meditate like for the past however long and you're still mad, then we should connect.
right. Yeah. So that's a good one. And you can definitely trust what Brandon does because I've seen a lot of what he does and what a lot of people say. And it's great that you are there and you found this as well. So everyone should be able to enjoy this experience and share it and learn from you as well. So thank you very much for that, Brandon. Uh, Lastly, we'd like to remind everyone that tomorrow we have a talk by Susan Kennard where she's talking about stepping out of the spiritual closet, which is at 6:30 a.m. Eastern timing and 6:30 p.m. Singapore timing, 11:30 a.m. UK timing today. And having said that, thank you everybody who have watched this, who have shared this time with us and spent this time with us, especially Brandon as well. If you guys have any questions, always feel free to connect with either one of us. If not, you can look Brandon up on his Instagram account. It's on the Spiritual Dope, and you can connect with him there as well. Love and light to all. Thanks a lot.